There is a photograph, not a famous one, not the wedding dress, not the North Korea handshake, not the championship celebration. A photograph posted on Instagram in 2024 by a 22-year-old woman standing on a soccer field in Paris wearing a gold medal. Trinity Rodman had just helped the United States women's national team win the Olympic gold medal at the Paris Games. She scored 3 goals in the tournament. She was the most compelling young player in women's soccer. She was 22 years old and an Olympic champion and the world's highest-paid women's soccer player by January of 2026 when she signed a contract reportedly worth more than $2 million annually. Her father was not in the photograph. He posted an apology on Instagram instead. It was accompanied by several photographs of the two of them together, old ones, from when she was small, set to the song Butterfly Kisses. He wrote, "I'm sorry for not being the dad you wanted me to be." He wrote, "I always had one wish, and it was I wish my kids would call me and come see me." He wrote it the way a man writes something when he has run out of other languages for the thing he is trying to say. Trinity had been on the Call Her Daddy podcast a few days before, and she had said, "He's not a dad. Maybe by blood, but nothing else." She had described her mother keeping the family together after the money did not arrive. She had described living in a Ford Expedition for a period, the car as their address, when the money ran out entirely. She had said, "I lost hope in ever getting him back. I answer the phone now for my conscience to be like he needed to hear my voice before anything happens. That's why I answer the phone, not for me." Not for me, the daughter of one of the 5 greatest defensive players in the history of professional basketball, picking up the phone for him. Not because it gives her something. Because she needs her conscience to be clear. Because something might happen. That sentence is the most important thing in the story of Dennis Rodman. Not the 7 consecutive rebounding titles. Not the 5 championships. Not the wedding dress or the hair or the North Korea trip. Or any of the performances that made him the most recognizable athlete of his era outside of Michael Jordan. The sentence a daughter says about why she still picks up the phone. Because that sentence is the answer to the question that the career has always been asking. What happens to the thing you loved you, but the world also failed? Have you ever loved someone whose damage was larger than their ability to manage it, and found yourself, years after you stopped expecting anything from them, still picking up the phone? Because that is the question at the center of Dennis Rodman's story. And it does not resolve cleanly. It does not end with the Hall of Fame speech, or the championship rings, or the tattoos that covered the body that the world had failed. It ends with a daughter on a soccer field in Paris with a gold medal, and a father posting butterfly kisses to Instagram, and the specific, devastating gap between those 2 images. But Oak Cliff comes first, and a garbage bag and a growth spurt, and a world that had already communicated, before he was old enough to argue with it, exactly what it thought he was worth. Dennis Keith Rodman was born on the 13th of May, 1961, in Trenton, New Jersey, the first child of Philander Rodman Jr. and Shirley Rodman. His father was not a presence. He left early, relocated to the Philippines, and eventually fathered 29 children with 16 different women across 2 continents. A fact that tells you something specific and important about the model of fatherhood Dennis Rodman had available to him. His mother Shirley raised him and his 2 sisters in Dallas, Texas, in the neighborhood of Oak Cliff, working up to 4 jobs simultaneously to keep food on the table and the lights on. She was rarely home. The house was present. The parent was not available in the way that children need a parent to be available, not because she didn't love them, but because survival consumed every hour. He was bullied as a child, painfully shy. He has said this consistently across decades of interviews, with the flat accuracy of someone who lived it. He clung to his mother's shirt. He was afraid of the neighborhood. He was small, 5'11", for most of his adolescence, in a world where the physical fact of your body was one of the primary currencies available to a black boy in Oak Cliff in the 1970s. He was not athletic. He played baseball poorly. His 2 sisters, Deborah and Kim, were the athletes of the family. Both went on to play college basketball. Dennis was the one nobody expected anything from. At 18, his mother changed the locks. She told him he needed to contribute or leave. He had a garbage bag. He left. He slept in a friend's yard. He worked washing dishes. He was arrested, at some point in this period, for stealing watches from the lost and found at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Watches he gave away to friends because he had nothing else to give, and because a watch was the kind of object that made another person feel like somebody cared. He has said he believed he had three options: jail, dealing, or dying. He said it without dramatization, as a statement of the actual calculus available to him in 1979 in Oak Cliff with a garbage bag and no particular reason to believe the calculation would improve. And then the growth spurt. Between his late teens and 20 years old, he grew nearly 8 inches. He went from 5 feet 11 to 6 feet 7. His body, which had spent his entire childhood being the wrong size and the wrong shape for every expectation placed on it, became something entirely different. And the thing that had been true before the growth, the ferocity, the refusal to be moved, the capacity to want the rebound more than the other person wanted to keep it, was still there, amplified now by a body that could do something with it. Have you ever had your circumstances change in a way that revealed something that had always been there, and understood that the thing the circumstances revealed was the point, not the circumstances themselves? Because that is what the growth spurt did for Dennis Rodman. It did not make him. It made him visible. The ferocity was already there. The basketball court was simply the first room large enough to hold it. Cook County Junior College in Gainesville, Texas, gave him the scholarship. Southeastern Oklahoma State University developed him. He averaged 25 points and 15 rebounds a game across 3 seasons, and the Detroit Pistons selected him with the 27th pick in the 1986 NBA draft. He was 24 years old. He had been playing organized basketball for 5 years. Every other player drafted that year had been playing organized basketball for at least a decade. The Detroit Pistons under Chuck Daly were building something specific and unusual. They were building a team that understood basketball not as the art of putting the ball in the basket, but as the discipline of preventing the other team from doing so. The Bad Boys. The rules they played by were the rules of controlled aggression, physical, psychological, intentional, and right at the edge of the permissible. Isaiah Thomas at the point, Joe Dumars at the shooting guard, Bill Laimbeer in the post, and Dennis Rodman everywhere else, the man who understood without being taught that the most important work happens in the spaces nobody else is watching. Chuck Daly saw something. He did not try to make Rodman into something he was not. He provided the structure within which what Rodman already was could function. He communicated, by his presence and his patience, and the specific management of a volatile talent that most coaches would have either broken or expelled, that what Dennis Rodman was, the ferocity, the refusal, the borderline obsessive commitment to the work that nobody celebrated, was exactly what was needed. He was, in the specific way that certain coaches become specific people's coaches, the first person in Dennis Rodman's professional life to look at the complete package and say, this, yes, all of it, here. Daly was also, by every account of every person who knew both of them, the closest thing Dennis Rodman had ever had to a father. The championships came, 1989 and 1990, back to back. Rodman's defensive intensity, his rebounding numbers, his complete and apparently boundless willingness to absorb contact and keep playing, these were the qualities that made the championships possible. He was named NBA Defensive Player of the Year in 1990 and 92. He was establishing himself as the finest defensive rebounder the sport had ever produced. He was also, quietly, accumulating the specific emotional architecture of a man who had found his first safe room. And then, the Pistons dismantled. Players left. The championship window closed. Trades happened. Chuck Daly resigned. And Dennis Rodman, who had constructed his entire sense of belonging and identity and purpose around a team, a city, a coach, and a structure that had accepted him completely, was suddenly, in the summer of 1993, without any of it. He drove to the parking lot of the Palace of Auburn Hills. He had a gun. He sat in that parking lot, and he had a note, and he sat with the decision for what he has described as a very long time. He has talked about this publicly across decades of interviews with a specific and unclinical honesty. It was not about basketball. It was about love. It was about the specific love he had needed since he was a child in Oak Cliff, clinging to his mother's shirt, and which the team and the coach and the structure had briefly provided, and which had now left. He sat in the car. He fell asleep. He woke up to police at the window. If you or someone you know is struggling right now, please reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988. It is free, confidential, and available around the clock. He went home. He stayed inside for 2 months. He has described those 2 months as the period in which something fundamental changed, not healed, not resolved, but changed. He decided, in the house, alone, that the person who emerged was going to be impossible to ignore. Not to draw love, he has been specific about this, but to be impossible to look past. The tattoos multiplied, the hair changed color, the ear piercings appeared, the wedding dress came later, the North Korea trip came much later. Every public act of the Dennis Rodman persona was, at its foundation, the decision made in a house in Auburn Hills in the autumn of 1993. If the world was going to fail to see him, he was going to make failing to see him impossible. Phil Jackson's Bulls needed him. Jordan and Pippen were the finest offensive combination in the sport. They needed someone to do what neither of them was built to do, retrieve the ball off the glass, every possession, without variation, without pride about the categories. The front office and every smart observer in the league told Jackson the risk was unacceptable. Jackson signed him anyway. Jackson understood, from his own practice of Zen Buddhism and his long study of the psychological requirements of team performance, that what Rodman needed was exactly what the system he ran. The triangle offense, the rotating decisions, the constant demand for present awareness could provide. Not approval. Structure. Rodman had always performed at his highest level inside structure. Phil Jackson's structure was the finest available. 3 more championships. 1996, 97, 98. The second Bulls dynasty. The thing that people discuss when they discuss those 3 years is Jordan and Pippen, their inevitability, their competitive fury, the specific quality of 2 elite players operating at the peak of their understanding of the game. What people discuss less is the specific, unglamorous, statistically irreplaceable contribution of the man who led the league in rebounding in every single one of those seasons. 7 consecutive rebounding titles. The record that nobody had approached before him, and that nobody has approached since. The record that says, this person wanted the ball off the glass more than anyone else who has ever played the game, every night, for 7 years in a row, without variation, without pride about the category. Have you ever done the work that made everyone else's work possible? The work that doesn't appear in the highlight reel, that nobody builds a statue for, that the broadcast camera misses because it happens in the wrong part of the frame, and done it anyway, every single night, because the work was what you were? Leave a comment below. Because that is the question Dennis Rodman has been answering on every basketball court he ever stood on, and the answer has never changed. He got the ball. Every time. At any cost. Because that was the thing he had been built to do, and the building had started in Oak Cliff, on a court with potholes, long before anyone knew what the building was for. The years after the Bulls dynasty produced the performances that the culture has always been more interested in than the sporting record. The wedding dress in 1996 to promote his autobiography Bad as I Wanna Be, a book that was, for all its provocations, one of the most honest accounts of what professional sport does to the psychology of the person performing it. The marriage to Carmen Electra that lasted 9 days. The relationship with Madonna, the reality television, the appearances in Las Vegas that became their own category of public behavior. And then, beginning in 2013, the trips to North Korea. The North Korea story is the one that the diplomatic establishment has never fully known what to do with. Dennis Rodman traveled to Pyongyang, met Kim Jong-un, attended basketball games, sang Happy Birthday on television, described the dictator as a friend for life. The State Department was not enthusiastic. Former basketball players and former intelligence officials were not enthusiastic. Rodman was enthusiastic. He said, "I don't want to do nothing with no politics. I just want to show that Americans can come here and have a good time." He was wrong about the politics. Everything that involves a head of state involves politics. But he was not wrong about the access. He had access that no diplomat had been able to achieve. Whether the access produced anything useful is a more complicated question. What it certainly produced was the most surreal diplomatic footnote in the history of professional basketball. He is still here. In 2025, Dennis Rodman was 64 years old. His daughter Trinity is the world's highest-paid women's soccer player, an Olympic gold medalist, and the most important young talent in American women's soccer. She signed a recording-setting 3-year contract with the Washington Spirit in January of 2026, worth more than $2 million annually. She is, by any objective measure, one of the most successful young athletes in American sport. She built it without him. Her mother, Michelle, raised her. She said, "When she made the unresolved draft as the youngest player in its history in 2021, obviously I got those genes from him. But I am just excited to be known as Trinity Rodman, not Dennis Rodman's daughter." He posted butterfly kisses on Instagram. He wrote, "I always had one wish, and it was I wish my kids would call me and come see me. Hopefully one day I can get that." The wish is real. The wish does not undo the expedition parked at the beach where Trinity and her brother and their mother lived when the money didn't come. It does not undo the games where he showed up unannounced after months of silence and she cried in the locker room at halftime. It does not undo the Hall of Fame speech in 2011 where he stood at the podium and said, "I have one regret, I wish I was a better father." He said it in a room full of the most powerful people in professional basketball. He said it while crying. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms get quiet when the true thing is said by the wrong person in the right moment. There is something in Dennis Rodman's story that the championship rings and the rebounding records and the Hall of Fame induction and the North Korea footage and the Carmen Electra wedding do not contain. It is the gap between what the talent was and what the person could do with the talent when the cameras were off and the structure was gone, and the only room available was the one inside the car in the Auburn Hills parking lot. He was the best in the world at retrieving what others missed. That was his specific, irreplaceable, statistically unprecedented gift. And the great irony, the one that lives in every Instagram post and every Call Her Daddy podcast and every Butterfly Kisses story, is that the thing he could not retrieve was the relationship with the children who had his name. Trinity still picks up the phone, not for herself, for her conscience, because something might happen and she needs to have heard his voice. That is not forgiveness. That is the specific, complicated, ongoing practice of a young woman who loves someone and has lost hope and keeps doing it anyway. It is, in its own way, the same refusal to stop that her father demonstrated on every basketball court he ever stood on. The ferocity is genetic. The application is entirely her own. What is the cycle in your life, the thing that was passed down to you, that cost you something, that you have had to decide, consciously and repeatedly, not to pass further, and what did making that decision teach you about the difference between inheritance and identity? Leave a comment below, because that is the question that Dennis Rodman's story is asking, and the person answering it most completely right now is not Dennis. It is Trinity, standing on a soccer field in Paris with a gold medal her father did not see her win, already deciding what kind of athlete she is going to be, and what kind of person, and what kind of parent, and doing it with the specific, clear-eyed determination of someone who grew up knowing exactly what absence costs, and who has chosen, very deliberately, to build something different. If this story found something in you, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what do you think Dennis Rodman's legacy actually is? Because the greatest thing he ever did on a basketball court may be the easiest part of the answer. The harder part lives in the gap between a Hall of Fame speech where he cried about his children and an Instagram post with butterfly kisses, and in a daughter who still picks up the phone